Now, the proof that root 2 is irrational is in the textbook. If you look in the Year 2 pure textbook on page 3, this is example 3. So that will be the proof that root 2 is irrational. And it's very similar to what we need to do. It's a proof by contradiction. So I write proof by contradiction. We want to assume the opposite, and something will go wrong, and that means we get a contradiction, which means that the original statement must be true. So we need to assume that root 5 is rational. So assume root 5 is rational. And if root 5 is rational, then we can write root 5 as two integers divided by each other. But we could also keep cancelling those two integers until they had no common factors. Okay, so if root 5 is rational, we can write it as integer a divided by integer b, where they have no common factor, where they have no common factors. That will become important later on, so make sure you write that down when you're doing your proof. So where a and b are integers with no common factors. Okay, so if we square both sides, we'll get 5 is a squared over b squared, and that means 5b squared equals a squared. So in other words, that means that a squared is a multiple of 5. Now that will mean a is also a multiple of 5. Now really we should prove that. That's a whole separate proof in itself. If you see page 2 of the textbook, example 2, you'll see how to do that for proving that if a squared is even, then a will also be even. So it's a very similar proof to prove going from this step to this step. I think in this, I think you can assume that this is true for this question. I think in an exam question, it might well say that you can assume this. So I'm just going to assume this is true, although really you should prove this step. So if a is also a multiple of 5, then we can let a equal 5 times by another integer, let's say k. So we'll let a equal 5k, where k is an integer. And if we substitute that back in to our equation here, that will give us 5b squared equals 5k, which is now a all squared. So 5b squared equals 25k squared. In other words, b squared equals 5k squared. Now that means that b squared is a multiple of 5. Remember, that means that b is also a multiple of 5, and that is a contradiction, because if a is a multiple of 5, so if a is a multiple of 5 and b is also a multiple of 5, then that means a and b must have a common factor. Okay, so therefore a and b have a common factor of 5. Now this is a contradiction. I like to use this symbol for contradiction. That is a contradiction. So that means that our original statement must be true. Okay, so should really write this down at the bottom. Therefore, root 5 is irrational.